is not interested in Christmas. Mark jumps right into John the Baptist. Mark is moving, man. Mark doesn't have time for this. So as we said yesterday, we see each of the Gospels a little bit different retelling of the Christmas story from a different perspective. Matthew, being very Jewish, gives us a Jewish perspective. Luke, being very Gentile, gives us a Gentile perspective. And as we talked yesterday, the reason why I love John so much is John gives us a cosmic perspective of what Christmas is all about. So today we're going to look at Matthew's Gospel. We're going to read Matthew chapter 1. We're gonna go 1 through 25. We may touch briefly on chapter 2, but we're primarily going to look at Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 through 25. Now, the birth of Jesus the Messiah took place in this way. When his mother, Mary, had been engaged to Joseph, but before they lived together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. Her husband Joseph, being a righteous man and unwilling to expose her to public disgrace, planned to dismiss her quietly. But just when he had resolved to do this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, for he will save the people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord to the prophet. Look, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son. They shall name him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. When Joseph awoke from his sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took her as his wife, but he had no marital relations with her till she had borne a son, and he named him Jesus. So we see in Matthew's gospel, we see Joseph's story and Joseph's perspective. If we were to back up in Matthew's gospel and read before this, we were to read before this, we would see the genealogy of Jesus going back to Abraham. So in Matthew's gospel, it goes to Abraham and it comes through to Joseph. We see it going all the way to Joseph. And so we see there in Matthew's gospel the linkage between Jesus through Joseph to Abraham, the fulfillment of the Jewish old covenant. We see that being a very strong impulse, a very strong thing in Matthew's gospel. If we were in Luke, when we read that Monday, we won't read the genealogy there either, but we'll see in Luke it goes all the way back to Adam, Adam being everyone. So Matthew focuses upon the Jewishness of Jesus. Luke focuses upon his openness to the Gentiles. But we see here, I love that it goes back to Abraham, because you remember God's original promise to Abraham that through his offspring, it would be a light to all the peoples, that all the peoples would see light through the offspring of Abraham, that Jesus was the ultimate fulfillment of the promise to Abraham, that through him would come this great gift to all the world. We see in verse 23, we see a quotation from the Old Testament where the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call him Emmanuel. We see there in this passage here that this tying in repeatedly the genealogy that we didn't read in this quotation from the Old Testament, tying in, you see how Matthew is reinforcing in the very beginning that this is to fulfill the old covenant in the Old Testament through Jesus. The old covenant through Jesus, the old promises have been completely and utterly fulfilled. Jesus is not a new thing. He's not a new thing. But rather, he's the completion of all things. He is the fulfillment of all things. As Jesus would tell us himself in the Sermon on the Mount, a few chapters from now, that he did not come to destroy the law, but to fulfill the law. That Jesus, we need to be very careful when we read the story of Jesus and when we read the story of his birth and we reread the story of Jesus in Matthew and the other Gospels, that we do not see Jesus as some new thing for the rest of the Bible. He's not. Jesus is not some new thing from the Old Testament, from the law and from the prophets. He's not. He's not a new thing. Even Luke tells us that. But he is the fulfillment of the old covenant. In Luke, we read a couple days ago about Emmaus. Remember? We read Emmaus, where it said that their hearts were warmed. They felt this fire within them when he opened up the prophets and the law, showing how it pointed to him. That all of the Old Testament and all the Old Covenant, it was pointing us to Jesus. Jesus was not We read the Bible like this wrong, y'all. This is how we read the Bible sometimes. We read the Bible and we see Adam and Eve sin in Genesis 1, and I mean, sorry, Genesis 3. And we're like, and we have this notion like God's going, oh no, man, they sinned. Oh, what am I going to do? Oh my gosh, they messed up, they sinned. Well, I guess I better send Noah, and that didn't work. So I guess I better send Abraham. That didn't work. We tried Moses. Well, that didn't work. Try David. That didn't work. The prophets. That didn't work. So I guess, golly, I've tried everything. I guess my last option is to send Jesus. I guess he's all I got left. And we read the Bible as though Jesus was God's last option. And what happens when you read the Bible, you see that Jesus was not the last option, but that Jesus was the plan the entire time. God was not caught off guard by the sins under the old covenant. God was not surprised by the disobedience of what happened, but God was building all of this from the very beginning. The Bible tells us that Jesus Christ was the lamb that was slain before the foundations of the world. Jesus Christ was not some late minute script change. You know, I don't know how many of you are watching the chaos going around Marvel right now, but they had to replace one of their big actors for some of their movies. And I've been watching some YouTube videos this week. But oh no, what's Marvel going to do now that this guy's been convicted of a crime? What are they going to do now? Are they going to replace him? Are they going to recast him? Are they going to change course? What are they going to do? Oh my gosh, they're caught off guard. Jesus was not a last minute script change, y'all. Jesus was not God's last hope. Jesus was not a Hail Mary at the very end of a football game, just flinging the ball up there to see what happens. That's not who Jesus is. Jesus was the plan the entire time. He was the point the entire time. And all that happened before, all the Old Testament, all the law, all the prophets, all that happened before this happened to better point us to Jesus, that he was the plan the entire time. It was always Jesus, y'all. It was always Jesus. Jesus wasn't God's last hope. Jesus was always the plan. That's why we should read the Old Testament looking for Jesus. That's why our eyes should always be focused on Jesus when we read the Old Testament. That's why when we read the Bible, the word's called Christologically. We read the Bible, we read the Old Testament looking for Jesus because he's on every page. He's on every page. He's everywhere. And all this was pointing to Jesus. So God's got a plan, y'all. You read all the Old Testament, you're like, golly, these folks sure are messing things up. These folks sure are making some mistakes. Oh my gosh, how's God going to fix all the messes they are making? And that's not the way to read the Old Testament. That's not the way to read the Bible. Jesus was not a last minute script change. Jesus was not some last minute reboot. But Jesus was the plan the entire time. He was the plan the entire time. So understand that. Understand what God was doing in all of this. Understand what God was building towards. Understand that all of it, y'all, points to Jesus. He's the fulfillment of all that's there. Matthew's gospel is a beautiful gospel. I love it. It's the most Jewish of all the gospels. It's going to always delve us back into the Old Testament, always delve us back into the prophets, to what God was doing. Remember, Jesus wasn't a last minute script change. He was the plan the entire time. He was the plan all along. So thanks for being with us today. Monday, Christmas morning, we'll read the Luke passage. Then we'll take a few days off. We'll take a few days off between now and then the first of the year, and then we'll pick back up in the new year. So thanks for being with us. I've enjoyed doing this with you. Have a great day and have a Merry Christmas Eve, and we'll see you on Christmas morning. Thanks.